In this video, we'll discuss the use of prefabs in Unity. You can think of a prefab as a template of a game object that you want to copy and use several times. Our objectives for this video will be to create a comet game object, turn it into a prefab, and then spawn several comets into the scene based on this prefab. Okay, let's start by creating another sphere in our world to represent the body of our comet. So here in the hierarchy, I will do the drop down and create a new sphere. And I'm going to go ahead and relabel it right away to comet. And let's position it at -10 meters in the x direction and 0, 0. So if I zoom out a little bit, you can see it's just, a little ways out from the sun. And right now it's pretty big, so I'm going to scale it down to, let's say 0.1, 0.1, 0.1, which I think was about the same size as our moon. And I actually also want to change the rotation on this object. So right now it's 0, 0, 0. Let me change it to 0, 100 degrees, 0. So if you look at it, you can see that the z-axis is pointing right along here because this is going to be, essentially a projectile that flies along this path along the z-axis, which is kind of the forward direction of a game object. Now, I actually added a couple more scripts that we'll use in this video to your assets, which may not have been shown in my previous videos. If I open the scripts folder, they are the projectile script and the spawner script. So we'll use both of those. Right now, we're going to use the projectile script. So let me go ahead and drag projectile onto the comet. And you can see it added that component here. And it's got a few different properties. It's got a speed and a destroy distance. So the speed is how fast this will move. And the destroy distance is how many meters away from the camera will it be destroyed. So let me play to demo this. If I click play, you're going to see here that it moves along. So that's what the script is doing, is it's making that move like a projectile. And it keeps moving, keeps moving. I'll zoom out a little bit farther. And then eventually it goes away. So the script actually destroyed it after it moved 20 meters outside of the camera. Let me go ahead and stop. Okay, let's make this look a little bit more like a comet. So right now it doesn't have a material. I didn't actually include a texture specific for a comet, but we could use the Pluto texture for this purpose. So let me just, use our shortcut and I'll drag and drop the Pluto texture onto the comet. And that will go ahead automatically and create a Pluto texture material. For purposes of organization, I'm going to go ahead and rename this as my comet material. And if I go back to the comet and tap F, you can see that now it's got a texture on it. And of course, we could modify the material if we wanted to, but let's just go with this for now. One additional thing that I want to do is I want to add a trail renderer to my comet. So as it zooms across, the outer space, it leaves a trail behind it. And there's actually a built-in component called a trail renderer. So with the comet selected, I'm going to go ahead and click on Add Component. And if I go down to Effects, you can see there is a trail renderer. Or you can always, use the search here, and I can just start typing trail, and trail renderer comes up. So let me select that to add that component. We'll scroll down to look at it. And let's just, before doing anything else, let me go ahead and hit play, just so you can see what it looks like. Zoom out here. You can see it's leaving this big trail behind my game object as it flies through the world. Now, right now it's really wide, too wide probably. So if we look at the components of the comet there, one of the components is the width. And remember, the width of our actual sphere is 0.1 now. So I'm going to actually drag this control point all the way down to right around 0.1, maybe just under 0.1. So it'll be, slightly less wide than, the sphere itself. Now, we can actually add a change in width over time. So if I go kind of to the end of this line and right click, I can add a key, which adds another control point, and then I'm going to drag this one all the way down to 0. So basically what this means is the width will start at around 0.1, and then it will go down to 0 at the end of the trail. Now our trail was kind of long, and that's based on the time. So this is how long the trail should basically exist. And it's set to 5, which basically means 5 seconds. I'm going to bring this down to 2. And you noticed also that, the look of it wasn't quite right. It was this big purple material. And, anytime you see something purple like that in Unity, it generally means that, the material isn't set up properly. And if I go down here, you notice that there's actually not a material attached. Now, we could make our own custom material and attach it here, but there is a built-in material that's often used with trail renderers. So let me hit the target here. And within Unity, there is one called the default dash line material. So let me go ahead and choose the default line material and close this. And if I press play now, you'll see a little bit different. So you can see it's a lot smaller as it goes across here, and it doesn't last as long. That's the time setting. Now we can do, a little bit of further customization here on that. So now that we've got the right material, I can actually set a color here. So let me click on color. And this brings up the gradient color tool, which allows us to set a difference in opacity or alpha here at the top, or a difference in color at the bottom. So if I click on the top thing here, this top indicator, notice the alpha is set to 255. If I click the last one on the far right, I can then change this to 0. So basically what this means is it will fade out over time. And then the same thing, I can click on the first one, the first indicator on the bottom, and I set a color. And I'm going to pick something like a yellow and close that. And you could change the in color as well if you wanted it to change from one color to another. But I'll just leave it as it is. And close that. And let's go ahead and press play again to see the effect. And as it comes across our main camera, you can see it's yellow now, and it kind of is transparent over time, so it fades out. Now, another thing that we want to do with our comet is we want it to have a sound. So we had one more sound in our sound assets. So let me choose the drone dark and scary. If I preview this, you can see it just is kind of this droning sound that sounds like maybe a spaceship or something, which would work good for this. So let me go ahead and drag and drop this onto our comet game object, and that will add the audio source and the audio clip. And then we want to make this continually play, so I will turn loop on once again, and we want this to be 3D positional. So I'll take the spatial blend and I'll go from 2D to 3D, and then we want to set up our 3D settings. And of course you can play with this, but I was going to make this the minimum distance as 1 and the maximum as 10, and hit return. So once again, this will make it sound like the comet is coming from left or right, and it will get louder as it gets closer to the camera and quieter as it goes away. So let's go ahead and play again just to hear the effect. Okay, now we have our comet game object set up. As I said up front, we actually want multiple comets in our world. So this one comet will serve as a template for other comets. Whenever we plan to have multiple game objects that are nearly identical, we should make what is called a prefab in Unity. Prefabs are essentially a template of a game object that you can use over and over again. By making a game object into a prefab, you then only need to update the prefab itself, and then all the game objects that are built off that prefab are updated. Conversely, you can use a prefab and then customize some of the properties of a game object built off of the prefab without affecting the other game objects built from the prefab. Now, prefabs are game assets, just like everything else in our project. So one way to create a prefab is to simply drag a game object into the project tab. So I can take my Comet game object and drag it over to the assets here and let go. And you can see it made a Comet game asset or a Comet prefab. Prefab is always the little box icon here. And you can see in my hierarchy, the game objects that are not prefabs are this sort of transparent box with no fill. And then the Comet now, since it's based on a prefab, is that blue color. So you can always kind of tell when something is based on a prefab and when it's not. Now, just to make things organized, let's go ahead and add a new folder for prefabs. So I'll click the plus here and create a new folder and name it prefabs. and then place my Comet prefab inside of it. Once again, just to keep my project nice and organized. So now that we have a prefab, I can actually drag, more comets out into my world. I can just drag a whole bunch of these now. They're all based on that one comet. And if I play, you can see all of them are going to fly across my world here. You may or may not see them because they might be at the wrong, height of my camera. But you could see them in the scene view moving along there. But I actually want the comets to spawn into the world over time. So let's actually delete all of the comets. So, I can, in the hierarchy, I can search for a comet and see all of them and then select all on the keyboard and then, right click and hit delete. And then get rid of my search so I see that, hey, I do actually have things in my scene, but no longer any comets. So what I want to create is actually a new spawner game object. So I'm going to create an empty game object. So one thing that you could do as a shortcut rather than clicking the plus is you can also right click, anywhere that doesn't have something, for example, in the hierarchy tab. So let me right click and I can choose create empty. And this will make an empty game object. And I'm going to name this my Comet spawner. And I want to make sure it's at -10, 0, 0 as position, the same place as our original comet was, which it is in that location. And I want the rotation to be 0, 100, 0. So I rotated the z-axis so the comet will fire, right between the sun and the camera. Now, one of the other scripts that I had was a spawner script. So let me attach the spawner script to the Comet spawner game object. Drag and drop it on that. And we can see now we've got a script here. And you can see now we have the spawner component attached to this game object. And one of the properties is the spawn prefab. So the spawn prefab is looking for a game object. But actually, we can use prefabs here. So since we created that Comet prefab, I could take that prefab and attach it right here, and that's what I want to actually spawn. And then we can set a spawn time, so this is how quickly in seconds between spawns of the comet, and I'll just leave it as the default of 5. You can, of course, change it if you want to. And let me demo. So after about 5 seconds, you'll see a comet spawn here. There it is. It will fly across. And then if we wait 5 more seconds, another one will spawn. So we continually have these comets spawning. You can see over here in the hierarchy, they're called comet clones because each of them is a clone of that prefab. And then when it gets far enough away, it destroys itself. So we don't get like a whole bunch of these comets. So, if we let this play and it didn't destroy itself, it would just keep making more and more comets in our hierarchy. So that's actually part of the script itself as it destroys itself on that projectile script. So let me stop that. As one final touch, let's actually add the rotate around script to our comet spawner. So once again, we used this way back earlier in this tutorial. So let me grab the rotate around script and attach it to our comet spawner. And I want this to rotate around the sun. And I'll set the speed at something like, 50 degrees per second. So basically what this is going to do is it's going to make that comet spawner spin around the sun, and it's way out here 10 meters out, so it's going to spin around kind of behind my camera, but this z-axis is always going to be kind of pointing somewhat toward the sun. So let's go ahead and try this. I'll hit play. So you can see every 5 seconds it's going to spawn a comet. And if you're really good, you can actually click on one of those comments as it goes by. And let me see if I can get this one. Okay, then my camera is going to follow that. And once it goes far enough out that it gets destroyed, it's going to jump back to the sun, because that's the way that script is set up, the look at script, the look at target script. Okay, let's stop and save our scene. And we now have a pretty dynamic solar system scene. Prefabs are an important concept, so let's review. Once you set up a game object with all of its components, you can convert it into a prefab. A prefab is essentially a template game object. With the prefab, you can make many additional game objects. The nice thing about game objects created from a prefab is that if you update the prefab, it will automatically update all of the game objects built upon it. Further, you can customize a game object built from a prefab and then revert back to the prefab if you don't like the changes. Or, if you customize a game object built from a prefab, you can apply the changes back to the prefab so that all the other game objects based on that prefab will be updated. Prefabs are a very powerful tool when building games in Unity.